Hmm, there we go. So guys, who wants to share? Come on, speed up a little bit. It's too early in the morning to be that slow. Thank you, Nicole. Great. So tell us what you guys did.
Okay, teacher. With forgetting this activity, we decide to make that together. But in this paragraph, we have confused with between clause 1 and clause 2. And for this part, I forget what is. I forget the structure for clause 2. For this, I don't know, is this one kind of clause 2, or maybe it's a sentence.
Okay, so let's make a little pause there. You gotta be careful because I know that yesterday when we did this exercise, just to show you an example, I numbered the clauses. So there might be, a lot of clauses in a paragraph. So we would say clause 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But that's not the actual, classification of it. If we say I had a great weekend, that is a clause. That is true. That is a clause. But it's not about numbering them, but identifying the kind of relationship they've got or the kind of clause they are. So for example, that first one, I had a great weekend. What kind of clause would be that? What kind of clause is that?
We consider is clause 1.
No, it's not about numbers. It's the kind of clause. Remember that we had two kinds of clauses. Remember?
Independent clause.
Uh,
Independent.
there we go. It's an independent clause because it can stand alone. That clause alone makes sense, right? So it has full meaning. But the fact that it is an independent clause means that, well, it doesn't need other information, and that's it. You see? And then we have another one. It says, I went home and took a shower. You see, this is very interesting because that one, guys, just to show you that I went home and took a shower. Is that a clause? Is that a sentence? What is that, guys? What would you say? What would you say about that one?
We consider that is a sentence.
Yes, it is. That is absolutely right. And why is it a sentence? Why is it a sentence? Let's try to remember, what makes a sentence a sentence. We said that there are essentially, guys, remember that there are essentially two criteria for a sentence to be a sentence, right? The first one is that it has to have full meaning. You see, it has to have full meaning. That's the most important one. And the second one, guys, I don't know if you guys remember, the second one is that they have to be not dependent. So that they don't need additional information. However, so that makes it a sentence, but this clause would be also a sentence. You see, this is what makes it a little bit complex and complicated because independent clauses are also sentences. Why? Why? Because sentences have full meaning. So if a portion of a text, let's call it, let me think about another way to put it. If the that group of words we see there expresses full meaning, that means that is a sentence, right? So if it stands alone, that is a sentence. If it doesn't need more information, that is a sentence. But in this case, as we have this conjunction, you might see here, guys, and I like this example a lot, we've got two clauses inside that sentence. You see, I went home and took a shower. You see, took a shower, I went home. Both of them are two clauses inside that sentence. So that means that that sentence uh, can be either compound or complex. It is not a simple sentence. Okay, so that's something we need to be careful with. This one, the one in green, that is a simple sentence, and it is a simple sentence because It has one subject, it has one complete verb, and has full meaning, and that's it. And there is no combination with other sentences, let's say. You see? So that's what I like you to focus on. So yes, I know that Nicole, you may have more questions on that, but those two examples that you shared with us, I believe are really, really important. Let's see the last one. Then I went to see a couple of my friends at a bar downtown. Is that, and you guys say that as a sentence? Yes, that is a sentence. Why? Because it has full meaning and it is independent, right? That's what we can say so far. But we'll see in a moment when we look at more examples, you know, how this thing with the sentences works. Because, you know, understanding clauses and phrases is important. But the most important thing here, guys, because remember, we are not doing this to become, I mean, the purpose of this topic in this class is not that you guys become experts at analyzing texts, but that you understand the structure of paragraphs. And when you write, you can see your texts from this perspective and you understand the kinds of sentences you're putting together. And at the same time, you can organize them, you know, better. That's essentially what we want. So we're gonna focus on this. Thank you very much, Nicole. I would like to have a quick look at somebody else's example. So if that's okay with you guys, we're gonna continue with the group number 1. So anybody in the group number 1, guys, Ana Maria, Daniela, Erika, Maria Alejandra, if that's okay with you guys, I would like you to please share your texts. As I said, we're gonna have a really quick look at most of your texts and see these kinds of situations. And then I will explain again the difference between between the sentences. And I think that's gonna help us understand a little bit better those differences. So let's see what we've got here, guys. So let's start by having a look at sentences, guys. Show us what you got in terms of sentences.
Um, okay. So we put like the sentences that are in blue, not
Mhm.
like highlighter, but in blue
Yeah.
are sentences. And uh, the highlighted with like baby yellow is dependent, if I'm not
Mhm.
wrong. I know it's independent, and with pink is dependent, because I was a little confused, but Ana Maria explained to me, and I think I understand what she said.
Mhm.
So I like make that. And yeah, the words with purple are phrases, and
Mhm. Mhm.
with green are clauses.
Okay.
But
Okay.
I'm a little confused about the difference between phrase and clause. So if
Okay. No
you
worries. No worries. Okay. So let's have a look at the phrases you've got. So for instance, the first phrase you've got there is each one of us. Is that a phrase, guys? Does somebody want to say something about that? Each one of us. Is that a phrase? I don't know. I'm just making that question. Somebody from another group, perhaps, if you will.
Yeah, I guess. But I'm not sure, teacher, because I'm confused phrase with clause. I know that a phrase is not part of sentence, but
Mhm. Yeah, well, that phrases, you know, guys, phrases are the easiest to spot. And yes, this is a phrase, by the way, because remember that phrases are groups of related words, right? It is as simple as that. A phrase is a group of related words, and we said that we've got essentially two kinds of phrases. We get noun phrases and verb phrases. Those are the two kinds that we already analyzed. So in this case, this is a noun phrase because there are no verbs. And these 4 words, each one of us, these 4 words refer basically to a noun, which is we, right? All of them refer to we. We can put it just like that. And as those words are related, we say this is a phrase. These 4 words are a phrase. It's a noun phrase because there is no verb, you see? Each one of us, there is no verb. So that is a phrase.
Mhm.
Phrases and clauses are super different. I'm sorry, guys, give me a second. phrases and clauses are super different because phrases only have either nouns or verbs, but you never combine them, you see? But in the case of clauses, you have both. You have nouns and verbs. You have subjects and verbs, you see? So there is conjugation, let's say. Verbs are conjugated. So let's try to have a look at one of what you guys believe it's a clause. So for instance, let me see, that just got just one. It says, is so fascinating. So to me, the clause in that case would be a little bit longer because in that case we are missing the subject. So if we
Mhm.
say, for example, it is so fascinating, that would be a clause. Or that kind of self-discovery is so fascinating, that would be also a clause, you see, because you have
Okay.
both things. You've got the subject and you also have the verb. In that case, that would be a clause. If you say that kind of discovery is so fascinating, that would be a clause in that case. And even if you even put it longer, to me, that kind of self-discovery is so fascinating, that is also a clause. It will be longer, but that's also a clause. The point here, guys, remember, is that we have two kinds of clauses. We have independent and dependent clauses. That is the actual the difference here. So we said that independent clauses can stand alone. So they alone make sense. They have full meaning. They don't necessarily need additional information. So that's why we say those are independent clauses. And dependent clauses, we say they need additional information. That is the key difference there, okay? And then once we have clauses, we start talking about sentences. And the thing with sentences, we said that there is one key for a sentence to be a sentence, you see, and the key is that they have full meaning. So let's say that we have keys. So for a phrase to become a clause, so phrases, to go from phrases to clauses, we say that the key is that there are both nouns and verbs, you see, so there is conjugation. That is the key to identify, to see the difference between phrases and clauses. So the key that you use to understand if it's a phrase or if it's a clause is if there is conjugation. If there is conjugation because there are nouns and verbs, that cannot be a phrase, that is a clause, you see? And the key to understand that step, let's say from clause to sentence, is full meaning. You see, it's full meaning. If you say this sentence makes sense and I don't need more information, that is a sentence. You see, that clause has full meaning. That clause doesn't need additional information. I know that is a sentence. You see, there is like a key to grow from one thing to the other. In the case from phrase to clause is conjugation, nouns and verbs together. So we have actions basically, and performers of those actions. And from clauses to sentence, the key is full meaning. You see, that's a way we could start, putting things together. But thank you very much, guys, for sharing. And what I really like about this exercise and what I believe is the most important thing here, guys, is that you tell us the kinds of doubts that you have. If you say something like that, I don't understand what a phrase is, or I confuse phrases and clauses, that is what we want to do with this exercise, apart from just, sharing what we've got. Yes, who's raising their hand? I think it was
Me,
Ana Maria.
teacher. Yeah,
Please.
I have a question with compound sentence. I'm not sure if we can understand it if we used an linking word between the independent sentence. I'm not sure if in the example in the yellow, yeah, we need the light to be able to understand things more clearly, yeah. But the first sentence is you have a light inside you, and the linking word is and, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Everything you've said is 100% true. So that's the thing.
Yeah.
This is the point where I like you guys to get. We've got actually one sentence there when you say you have a light inside you and we need that light to be able to understand things more clearly. That is a sentence. And as you say, as we have that conjunction and, it means that that sentence is not simple. That's something we know. That sentence is not simple if we've got those two parts, you see? The question here is that a compound sentence or a complex sentence? And that is what we're gonna answer today, okay? So I really wanna keep you, I would like you to keep that example. And actually we can work on that in a moment because that's what I would like to explain in a moment. We know that this is, for instance, if you say, you have a light inside you, that is a simple sentence. You are missing just you should highlight that part, and that is a simple sentence. And then we have another simple sentence starting in we. We need that light to be able to understand things more clearly. But in a moment, we'll see if that is a compound or complex sentence. And actually, there is another kind of sentence because we are missing, in this moment, we are missing two kinds of sentences just to study, and that is compound complex. You see, because there are simple, compound, complex, and compound complex. There are four kinds of sentences. And even though it sounds complex, it actually isn't. We will see in a moment that that's not quite a big deal, but that's a very, very good question. But as I said, we're gonna answer that in a moment because that's exactly what's next, okay?
Okay, teacher.
So guys, let's have a look at one final example. So this time I'd like to know if anybody of you would like to share their exercise freely, and I will not push you to do it. Who wants to share their exercise so we can comment it? Come on, guys, really? You can do this. Thank you, John. Thank you very much indeed. So yeah, please share your exercise and we will comment on that. Remember, the most important thing here, guys, is that you share with us your doubts, your questions, your issues with the exercise, so we can comment on that specifically.
Okay, teacher. Here is my text. I have a doubt with the first part because I don't know if we can divide it that in those two parts. The first in a simple sentence and the second in a phrase. I don't know if it is possible.
Wow, actually, that's absolutely correct. Yes, the first part, Jupiter is the fifth planet from the sun. Yes, that is a simple sentence. If you say the largest in the solar system, that is a phrase. That is a noun phrase. That was a very good exercise, actually. So yeah, that's absolutely right. And why? Because, for instance, in this phrase, this is a very good example of a phrase because we've got 6 words, and that is a phrase because, as you can see, there is no verb whatsoever. So this is a very good example of a phrase. So yeah, the answer is yes, John. That's just perfect.
Okay, teacher.
Okay, let's see what else we have. You said, for instance, okay, so you've got an example of a simple sentence. That's perfect. And actually, that simple sentence could be a little bit longer. And we could say that the whole thing from Jupiter to system, that it's also a simple sentence. That together could be a simple sentence because, you know, one difference here is that, yeah, we have a conjunction, but after that conjunction, we have no verbs, you see? So this conjunction is not coordinating two sentences, but it's just expanding the information. So once again, we've got only one verb, which is. So we could say that Jupiter is the fifth planet from the sun and the largest in the solar system. That whole thing is a simple sentence as well. We could also say that. Then we've got this other one, which is a dependent clause. It says, but slightly less than 1,000th the mass of the sun. That is absolutely right, because we know that this information depends on the previous information, and this expands what is before. So we really need this to be connected. So yes, that is an example of a dependent independent clause. Let me double check. Yes, in this case, the verb is implicit. It is a gas giant with a mass with more than 2.5 times the solar system combined. Yeah, that's just perfect. Then we have an independent clause, which is Jupiter is the third brightest natural object in the Earth, night sky after the moon. After the moon and Venus. So yes, that's an independent clause. That is true. And also an example of a simple sentence, if you want it. The king of the gods. That's also an example of a phrase. That's perfect. And because of its observed size, that's also a case of a dependent clause. That's just perfect, John. That was a very, very good exercise. I think all of the examples are right. And yeah, I wouldn't change anything. That is just perfect. That was a very good example. So thank you very much for sharing. Okay, guys, nice. So what we're gonna do now, we're gonna just have a look at the different kinds of sentences. And once again, remember, for the purpose of this class, we don't want to become experts on analyzing texts and describing at detail what a phrase is, but what we want to understand is the structure of a well-written paragraph. So it's like, you know, since I've been teaching, which is almost 10 years already, let me see, 11 years already. No, yes, 10 years already, teaching since I graduated from university. I would say that the top problem I've seen in students when they are writing in English is the length of their sentences. And I'm 100% sure about this. This is the most serious problem people have when they are writing in English, the length of their sentences. So there are cases in which they know how to conjugate, or people know how to select, choose the right vocabulary, but still sentences tend to be extremely long. And that happens because we don't understand the kind of sentence we are writing. Of course, when we are writing, we don't say, for instance, okay, I will start with a simple sentence. Now I'm gonna use a complex one, and then I will combine it with a compound. You don't say that, you see, because that would make it just impossible to write. We just write freely. But as we write, we need to clarify our ideas in our heads, in our minds. So when we write, we know when to stop. So the point here, guys, is learn when to use punctuation and know exactly when the idea is full. So we don't need to continue adding info, because that's something that happens a lot. So let me share my screen and we will have a look at that again, because there is specifically a slide. Oh, I don't see it. Give me a second, because I need to look for that in another presentation I've got, because there is one specific slide which has those two words that I would like you to focus on. There you go. I just found it. Let me just put it in the other one. There you go. Okay, guys. So the best way to understand how this thing of the sentences work is keeping in mind these two concepts, guys. These two concepts are super, super important. So we know that we said that sentences have full meaning. This is the most important thing to keep in mind here. So when we are, let's try to focus more on writing. When we are writing, and well, we know that we have to use punctuation, but we know that we are writing sentences. That's what we do when we write a paragraph. We write sentences. Yeah, we write phrases, we write clauses, we write graphemes or letters. I mean, yeah, but let's focus about the way you are actually compound a paragraph. So if I ask you to write an essay or to write just a paragraph, you would write sentences and you would connect those sentences, and those sentences together would make up paragraphs, and those paragraphs would make up pages, and so on and so forth, right? But those sentences tend to be connected with one another, right? There are relations we build. So there are some cases in which sentences are absolutely independent and they go alone somehow, but there are cases in which we need to connect them, right? We need to connect the clauses, we need to connect the sentences we are writing. So You know that when we are writing sentences, we already know that the simplest kind of sentence is a simple sentence. It's a sentence which has no conjunctions, a sentence which is just goes straight to the point, like the examples you shared before. But we cannot write just simple sentences. Imagine if we wrote just simple sentence period, simple sentence period, simple sentence period. The texts would look very weird. So apart from writing those simple sentences alone, we also need to connect them. And we connect those sentences essentially in two different ways. We can use a relation of subordination or a relation of coordination. So when we use a relation of subordination, we use conjunctions like because, although, since, right? That's the kind of subordination conjunction we use. We use that in order to show that one sentence gives additional information about the other. In other words, one sentence is more independent, is more important than the other, right? And that's why we call it subordination, because one sentence is subordinated to the other. But we also use relations of coordination, in which we say these two ideas, these two sentences are equally important. So we connect them with and, but, or, right? So that's a relation of coordination. These two concepts, guys, are essential to understand if a sentence is either complex or compound. And that's what we're gonna see in a moment, you see? So once again, I would like you just to think about that. Let's think about the fact, like you have homework for tomorrow, and the homework is to write a paragraph on any topic. That's your homework. So if you know that you have to write a paragraph, a 500 words paragraph, for instance, you know that you need to write sentences for that, right? It is as simple as that. And you can write simple sentences and then use punctuation, but you also use longer sentences in which you show other kinds of connections and stuff. You don't simply write simple sentences, because that would be like a shopping list almost. So that's not how it works. So these two, guys, these two concepts are really, really important to understand the rest of the thing. So let me just go over the sentences. So before we continue, guys, we know, once again, we know what a simple sentence is. We know that a simple sentence has full meaning, which means that it can stand alone. So you don't need additional information, and that's a simple sentence, right? So those examples that you shared before, guys, are just perfect. That is a simple sentence, right? So I think we don't have doubts about that. So we know that we have a subject, we have a verb, and we have a complement, and that makes sense alone. You don't feel like you're missing something. So if we think about a simple sentence, it's very simple. It's very, very simple to understand. If I say, I drink coffee every morning, that is a simple sentence, you see. I love my cats. That's a simple sentence, you see. I live in Bogota. That is a simple sentence, you see. So that is as simple as that. But the problem is when we know that we start using, you know, conjunctions and connections of those sentences with other sentences. So I love my cats because they are a very important part of my life. You see, that is also a sentence, but is different, is longer. You see, there is connection, there are relations. So that's different. I live in Bogota, but my family comes from a different part of the country. You see, that's also a sentence, but that's a different kind of sentence. And that's what I'd like you guys to focus on. So the first kind of sentence, guys, and that's the first we studied yesterday, is compound sentences, okay? And the key here is that compound sentences are made up two independent clauses. Two independent clauses or complete sentences. So it means that those sentences are compound of clauses or sentences that have full meaning as well. So if I say I have a pet iguana, and if we say his name is Fluffy, those two sentences could be complete sentences alone, right? So that's why we say that they are compound, because both of them are dependent. They could work alone. That's what makes them compound sentences. So we have independent clause, independent clause. That's what makes it compound sentences, which means that we could separate them and use them alone. If for instance, in this case, we would just simply delete the conjunction and the comma. And if we give it a context, of course, that would be complete sentences. So for example, if I say, guys, if I'm writing the text once again, and I say, I have a pet iguana, period. His name is Fluffy, period. That's okay. In terms of a style, it doesn't look very good, but that's okay. Although in some cases, because of a style, you could do that. You see, let's think about that as well. You could use punctuation for a reason, to communicate something. For instance, if I say, for instance, I met my girlfriend in Bogota, period. And then I love her. You see, that looks weird, but there is an intention. There is an intention. Like I want to focus the attention on the reader on a feeling. You see, so that would make sense. There might be a reason for that, but the point is that you can do that. And in compound sentences, we have two independent sentences. How do you know that? Just if you know that you can delete the conjunction and the comma in this case, and they would make sense together, you know that they are a compound sentence. So if I say, I have a pet iguana, comma, his name is Fluffy, comma, no, but period, his name is Fluffy. That would be a compound sentence. You see, it is a compound sentence because it's compound of two independent clauses, or in other words, two simple sentences. So far, so good, guys?
Yes, teacher, but sorry, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
The expression or the word that is a coordinating conjunction, or it depends? Because for example,
wow.
for example, I don't know, in the sentence, I bought a book that was on the library, for example. It will be a compound sentence, or how works the word that in that
That's
case?
a very good question. That is a very good question. In that case, if we are using that, we have to go back here to the kind of connection we've got there, if it's subordination or coordination. So when we use that, this is not, that would be, let me think about an example. So for example, that example, I bought a book that was in the bookshop, for instance. In that case, that is subordinating, because the second part depends on the first. You see, I bought the book, that is an independent clause, let's say. And the second part, that was in, that it's a subordination. So that means that the second part it's additional information to the previous, you see. And let me just give me 1 second. And as we explain the other kind of sentence, we are going to answer that question completely. So that's another thing that we need to be careful with, the kind of conjunction we are using, because the kind of conjunction we are using creates the relation. So that question that Lina just made has to do with that. But give me 1 second. As we explain complex sentences, I will answer that question completely. Okay? That's okay with you. So let's have a look at complex sentences directly. The difference between compound and complex is that complex contain at least a dependent clause. You see, that is the difference. So they might look similar, but they contain a dependent clause. You see, so only complex sentences and complex compound sentences have dependent clauses. So in the previous one, in compound is independent, independent. In this case, independent, dependent. You see, so for instance, when I say, when I grow up, I'll use complete sentences. When I grow up, I'll use complete sentences. So in this case, guys, which one is the dependent and which one is the independent?
The first one is dependent. When I grow up.
There you go. The first one is dependent. You see, the first one depends on the second. You see, you could put it the other way around. Actually, I'll use complete sentences when I grow up. You can say it as well like that. But the first one, when I grow up, is dependent. And I'll use complete sentences it has full meaning and is independent. So if you say I'll use complete sentences, period, that's okay. That makes sense. So we cannot say, we cannot do what we did with the previous one that I was say, for instance, when I grow up, period, I'll use complete sentences. We cannot do that. Or we cannot either say, I'll use complete sentences, period, when I grow up. No, it makes no sense because when I grow up needs the other one. You see, it needs the other part. So that's what makes it a complex sentence, because it has different kinds of clauses. In the case of compound, the clauses are the same kind. They are independent. You see, so we could separate them if we wanted. But in the case of complex, we cannot separate them just like that, because that would be a fragment. That would be an error. Okay, so trying to answer Lina's question when she said, I bought a book that was in the shop, for instance, that would be a complex sentence. That would be a complex sentence because of the kinds of clause. I bought a book that's independent, and that was in the shop, that is dependent. So that's why that sentence would be complex, you see. In complex sentences, we know that we have two kinds of clauses and they are connected, right? And they are connected sometimes using conjunctions, like the example of Lina, that's, and they are connected also with punctuation, like commas, you see? That's important, guys, for you to keep in mind. Punctuation, actually in both English and Spanish, can have different functions. So commas are not just for separating parts of sentences. Commas can also work as a way to connect sentences, just like this example, you see? So we have to be careful with that. So that's my answer to your question, Lina. In that case, that example you shared with us would be a complex sentence because the clauses are different. We have one clause which is independent and one clause which is dependent. Okay?
Okay, teacher, perfect. For example, if we change that sentence and we say, for example, they have a book that they bought on the bookshop. This is like a compound, yes, because I use like a subject in the other sentence.
I compound that they bought. No, you know what? That would be still a complex sentence. Why? Because the second part wouldn't stand alone. Remember that idea of full meaning. If you say that they bought it, like they bought in the shop. They bought in the shop. They bought what? You see? If we are missing something, that means that the meaning is not full. The meaning is not full. And that means that it depends on another thing. So they have a book, independent clause, good, that they bought in a shop. So we just stick to the second part, that they bought in the shop, or they bought in the shop. They bought in the shop. They bought what, you see? So as we are missing information, we know that it has no full meaning. And if it has no full meaning, it depends on something else, you see? So in that case, it wouldn't be an independent clause. So if we want to make it an independent clause, that example, we would try to do something like, they have a book. That's the first part. Period. They bought it as a present in a shop. You see? As we put it has full meaning in that case. It is referring to something which is before, but in that case, it has full meaning because you don't have this idea that you are missing something, you see? So that's something to be careful with, because remember that for a compound sentence to be a compound sentence, a way in which you can analyze it is if you can actually separate it. If you cannot separate it, it is not a compound sentence. You see, like this example that I gave you before, okay? So that's something to be careful with. So just as a summary, guys, the first kind of sentence is simple sentence. So we know that a simple sentence is a simple sentence because it has full meaning and it can stand alone. So it alone makes sense. and it has full meaning, which means that you don't need any additional information. So we've got lots of different examples, and if you can think about examples very easily, but that's a simple sentence. Then we also said that we need to be careful because those simple sentences, we combine them with others, we connect them with other sentences, and we create at least two different kinds of relations, which are subordination and coordination, right? And in the case of compound sentences, we tend to have subordination. In the case of complex, in the case of compound, we have coordination in most of the cases. And in the case of complex, we tend to have subordination because one depends on the other, right? So we say that compound sentences are sentences made of two independent clauses. So compound sentences have two independent clauses. So and that means that we could separate them if we wanted, right? But in the case of complex, we say it's not independent, but independent, dependent. That is the difference. You see, so compound is independent, and complex, dependent, independent, dependent. You see, that is the difference. Okay. And just to show you the examples of all of them, I just found this on the website of Grammarly, these examples. They are really good. So look, this is an example of a simple sentence. King Kong and Godzilla destroyed the city. So, for instance, we have a conjunction here. But the fact that we have a conjunction doesn't mean that we have two sentences. Of course not, because we have only one verb, which is destroy. You see, every sentence has a verb. So that's another way to see the point. If we have in a sentence two verbs, conjugated verbs, complete verbs, that means that we have two clauses inside, for instance. So King Kong and Godzilla destroy the city. You see, that is simple, very easy. Then we have King Kong didn't want to destroy the city, but Godzilla enjoyed it. You see, that is a compound sentence. And we know it's a compound sentence because we could separate the two different ideas. So we could say, King Kong didn't want to destroy the city, period. Godzilla enjoyed it. You see? It's like you understand. You say, enjoyed what? Well, enjoyed it, which was to destroy the city. This is something we will study later, guys. Although I've studied this before with some of you, which is the difference between given and new information. That is also something that affects the relation between the sentences. But you see, this is a compound sentence because of that, because these two clauses are independent, because we can separate them. King Kong didn't want to destroy the city, but Godzilla enjoyed it. Or King Kong didn't want to destroy the city, period. Godzilla enjoyed it. You see? That makes sense. That is absolutely possible. So we could leave it just like that. But then we have a complex sentence. So King Kong and Godzilla destroyed the city because they were fighting. So we have this conjunction, which introduces this second clause. And this clause is what we call a what kind of clause, guys? This is a what clause? They were fighting. What kind of clause is this one?
Independent.
Independent. You sure about that?
The first one is
Independent
independent.
because the action depends on what the like King Kong and Godzilla are doing.
Exactly. So King Kong and Godzilla destroyed the city. That is independent, and they were fighting is dependent. I mean, this part depends on this. If this part doesn't exist, this second makes no sense. You see? So here, guys, I think we've got the summary of everything I've said today. You see, the whole summary is here. Simple, compound, complex. Simple, we have only one verb, right? So that means that we have only one sentence. Here, King Kong didn't want to destroy the city. We have want, and then we have enjoy. That also gives us the clue that we've got two sentences. And same thing happens here. Destroy and where. You see, two verbs. Yes, Felipe?
Teacher, I have just one question. Is necessary to put the comma? and then put like a connector like that, because well, in those examples that you give,
Mhm.
like comma
No.
and then
No. In that case, it's not absolutely necessary. That's a very good question, Felipe. Actually, in the second sentence, we could omit the comma. We could say King Kong didn't want to destroy the city, but Godzilla enjoyed it. It's possible. There are some cases in which we use punctuation as a matter of a style as well, you see? So we don't use commas because we absolutely need them, but we use them for style. So in this case, for instance, the person who wrote the sentence use that comma there just to give more emphasis to the second sentence, to the second clause. It's for a style there, because if we say King Kong didn't want to destroy the city, but Godzilla enjoyed it, we would say it or read it like that. So it's okay. It's absolutely okay. But with the comma, you put more emphasis. So that's why it's there. So King Kong didn't want to destroy the city, but Godzilla enjoyed it. You see, so you are giving more emphasis to the second one. So this is what I said before. Punctuation is there for several reasons. It's not just for organizing the parts of a sentence, which is the most important function, of course, but it could also be there for a reason, you know, for a particular intention. So yes, Felipe, thank you for that question.
it's
But in
possible
this case, we could delete it.
it's possible in both, like with comma and without comma. Yes.
In both, which ones? In the compound and the complex?
No. It's possible in both ways. Like
Oh
putting
yeah,
a comma.
absolutely. Yes.
Thank you, teacher.
Yes. Absolutely, yes. That's a very good appreciation, by the way. So yes, in this case, we could use a comma or the comma or just the conjunction or both. But we have to use at least one of them, you see? And then guys, we have the last kind of sentence, which is compound complex. Compound complex. So look what happens in this case. After mustering all his strength, King Kong threw a final punch and Godzilla fell. So what happens in this case, guys? In this case, what happens is that we have actually three different clauses in this case. We would have both compound and complex, and that's why it's called like that. So that means that we have independent clauses and dependent clauses. So for instance, in this case, after mastering all his strength, that would be an independent, a dependent clause, I'm sorry. Give me a second. That would be a dependent clause. Give me a second, guys. I need to answer a message really quick. A second. Okay, so that is a dependent clause, right? After mastering all his strength, because if we don't have the rest of the sentence, that makes no sense. By the way, guys, question: what is muster? You know what muster is? You know what muster is in this case, guys? Muster? No?
It's like putting all the things together. Like
Yeah, it's like collecting or assemble, but that means that it's as you know, for those of you who like Dragon Ball, when they would, you know, like super concentrate and you know, like get all their power together, that would be to muster. So to muster is like to assemble or to collect, in this case is strength. So that means that King Kong was like charging all his strength. That's what it means. So it says, after mustering all his strength, King Kong threw a final punch and Godzilla fell. So we've got three different clauses here. So we said that after mastering all his strength, that is dependent. Then we have King Kong threw a final punch. That would be independent. And Godzilla fell. That is also independent. So we have dependent, independent, independent. You see? So that's why it's called compound complex. But once again, guys, if you focus on the complete verbs, it's going to be very easy for you to see how many clauses are there. Because in this case, we have three verbs: mustering, through, fell. So we know that it has 3 different parts. You see, we have 3 different clauses, but the clauses are different. So the first one is as we said, dependent. The second one is independent, and the last one is also independent. You see? So that's basically, these are the examples, the kinds of sentences, guys. So if we understand this, if we keep this in mind, I believe this is going to be easier for us to avoid this problem that most of people have when they are writing texts in English, which is writing very, very long texts. As I said, guys, when you are writing, you are not thinking about all these metalinguistics. You see, we don't say, okay, I will write my paragraph. I will start with a complex sentence. Then I will choose a compound. Then I'm going to play with some compound complex sentences, and I will end with a simple sentence. You don't do that. You see, you don't do that. This is something you do automatically. Because if you did that, you would just get crazy. I mean, that would be so cringe, actually, to see that a person does that. So you just write in a more natural way, hopefully. But as you do it, guys, the point here is that you've seen that I've said several times sentences, but I also have said ideas. That's how we put the texts together. We don't think in sentences, we think in ideas. So we have an idea and we want to put it in a text. And to convert that idea into a sentence, we need to make an effort to put, words together. And that's the point. When we are writing a paragraph, we need to focus on expressing our ideas clearly. And we know that there are several ways in which we can put the ideas clearly. So for example, let's say once again, I want to write a paragraph. And I want to write a paragraph. And it's a paragraph about my feelings since the pandemic started, let's say. That's going to be my paragraph, right? So I say like, okay, I will write about that, but I will write this paragraph focusing on my cats and how my cats have been so important for me. That's what I want the paragraph to be about. So I know that the opening sentence or topic sentence has to present that, has to send that message. This is something we discussed, I think, yesterday. So as I want to talk about my cats, I need to be very specific. So how can I say that my cats were important to me? Let me think. And then I come up with an idea like, since the pandemic started, I discovered that I always had a very important company. I will say that. Since the pandemic started, I discovered that I have always had a very important company, let's say. I could put it like that. So far, so good. And then I could say, comma, my cats, you see? Since the pandemic started, I found or I discovered that I have always had a very important company, comma, my cats, you see? That is a long sentence, but that's one idea, you see? So we separate ideas or we connect ideas clearly, but we cannot just write and write, because what happens sometimes is that I've seen in the texts that people would say that and then they would put a comma and they would continue with a new idea. Please don't do that, because that's so confusing when you are writing, you see? So my suggestion would be every time you write, when you finish a paragraph, let's say, you read it again. And if you see that a sentence is too long, in that moment is when you have to think about all of this, simplex, compound, complex, compound. That's when you have to see if there is a problem, because if a sentence is too long, that's not normal. Let's focus on that. Every time you're writing in English, if the sentence is too long, that is not normal. Chances are that there is something that you could improve. So my tip number one is never use too long sentences. Try to avoid too long sentences, because the possibility of having a fragment there, of having a problem and mistake there, is quite often very high. So let's try to avoid those sentences to be that long. And if you see that a sentence is a little bit too long, you have to see what kind of sentence is. So you know if you can use commas, or if you should use any other kind of punctuation, or if you can use conjunction instead, any conjunction instead. Okay, so guys, I'd like to know if you have questions about this or comments. I really would like to listen to you.
Well, teacher, I want to say something, and is that I have heard that when we are writing, we normally use like commas in order like to enumerate or to explain like things in deeply, but we can use like punctuation, like periods, in order to divide sentences. So it's better like to do in that sense. That is right.
That is right. That is right. And you know what, guys? I think that later, I think in the coming days, we should have a look at the functions of punctuation, because what Felipe has said is so important. Look that, for instance, he says we use commas for numerating. That is true. That is absolutely true. So that means that the use of commas would allow you to build longer sentences, but still you would be talking about the same idea. So in that case, punctuation is the key to avoid having, you know, a mistake in your text, for example. But at the same time, we know that we can use commas for other things. So commas are not used only for enumerating. You see, commas could be even used for presenting new information, like the example we have here in this compound sentence. You see, this is not for enumerating. We could change it for other things. So the function here is different. So we also need to be careful with that. But what is true is, as you said, periods are used to separate ideas or sentences. And that's another thing that I suggest. Let's try to use more periods. Let's try to separate ideas more, because this is something that I've seen that sometimes people don't do quite often. So yeah, absolutely right, Felipe. Thank you. Any other comment, guys? I really like to listen to you. We've got 32 people, and I've heard just like the voice of 3 or 4 today. What the hell? So, guys, come on. Please help me out with this. Nobody has comments, no questions. You feel like I'm ready to write a novel, if you will.
Here, I want to clarify something. So if I want to write a text, your advice is that we need to use more periods in order to make the text more clearly. Yes.
Yeah, it's like this is an observation I made based on my experience checking texts of students, as I said, during this 10 years. And that's a way to put it, but be careful, because it doesn't mean that that's the solution. Because if you use periods, but your sentences are broken and you're not conjugating verbs well, in that case, that wouldn't change anything. But yeah, I mean, I could say, guys, to be honest, that all this topic of language conventions, sentences, phrases, clauses, all this thing was to tell you, please don't write too long sentences. I could say that, believe me, because every time, quite often, every time I explain this topic, that is one of the reasons why I do it, because I start seeing texts which have too long sentences, and I say, wait a minute, we really need to cover this. You say, although I quite often also teach this at the beginning of courses also. But yes, Nicolas, a way to put it would be avoid writing too long sentences. I could say it that way. And to do it, well, you can use punctuation. You can be if you are aware of the kinds of sentences, you would use, you know, conjunctions in a different way, because I don't want to say don't write long sentences because they look bad. No, don't write too long sentences, because chances are that those sentences have errors, and those errors are there because we don't understand this. We don't understand the kinds of clauses and the kinds of sentences we are writing. You see?
Okay, teacher. Yeah, thank you, teacher.
There you go. And that's something we're going to work on as we continue with the project and with the business plan. The business plan would be a very good excuse for us to play with this. And remember that the point with the project is to learn to communicate more effectively. So we're going to, and also based on what Felipe said, we are going to work a lot on using punctuation, not just for separating ideas or enumerating, but also for emphasizing and for you know, yeah, putting emphasis on certain parts of a text, so the texts are at the end of the day more powerful. That's something we want to do as well. Okay, guys. So guys, I'd like to know if you have another question or if you have no questions whatsoever. You've made some really good questions today, actually, but there are some others who are like extremely shy. So that is a shame, but that happens, right? Okay, guys. So as you guys have no questions, we are going to assign a little exercise / homework in which you guys will practice this that we have said. So guys, I would like you to go to the book. Oh, wait a minute. Well, whatever. I would like you to go to the book, the lesson we were working on yesterday, which was the lesson 1.4, if I'm not wrong. Let me see. Yes, 1.4. So let me share my screen again so we see that. So we were working on this lesson, right? 1.4. So guys, I'd like you to work on this task, which is the exercise number 4. Okay, number 4. So the suggestion here is to work with a partner. So they say, turn to page 126. So we're gonna go there, guys, and we'll see exactly what is the exercise that we have there, 126. So is this exercise right here? Let me just put it a little bit bigger so you can see a little bit better what I'm talking about. So it's this one on the right. So exercise 4, it says, look at the information about a population change in 3 megacities in Latin America. Summarize the information with a partner. So what they call a megacity is normally a very large city, typically one with a population of over 10 million people. So for instance, Bogota is a megacity now. So they say in 2013, there were 24 megacities in the world, including 4 in Latin America. So we've got, you know, the graphs, just like the graphs we had in this exercise we did previously. So guys, what you have to do is to write a report. What do you mean by report? Well, we read a report in the lesson. We read this report, which was on the right, which was the text on the graphs. So you have to do that kind of text. So that means that that report should have 3 sections: introduction, body of a report, and conclusion. So in other words, you have to use these 2 graphs. You have to use these 2 graphs to write a text like the one we had in the lesson 1.4. So let me go over there really quick. There we are. So this is a report, you see? This is the example of a report. There you go. So that's essentially what you guys have to do. So you have to write this kind of text, you see, which is 3 short paragraphs. That's what you have to do, but you gotta do it with the graphs in the page number 126, which is this. That is the homework we've got for tomorrow. So you guys will do it as it's suggested here in pairs. I'd like you to do it. You can do it in pairs or in groups of 3 people, if that's okay with you guys. And tomorrow we're gonna have another exercise in class doing these reports, and you will also upload this to Moodle, but that's an instruction that I'll give you tomorrow. Okay, guys? So it is as simple as that. This is the homework for tomorrow. Have you got any questions, guys?
Yes, teacher. What they mean by introduction is like the opening sentence.
What they mean by introduction would be the first paragraph. So it's, as you can see here, they say introduction, body, and report. So this is what we've got here. They mean this. Let me show you. I'm sorry. So they mean basically, dude, they mean these sections that we already have in this report here. So according to what they call introduction, oh, dude, seriously, what happens? It would be this part. So this is the introduction. That's what they call introduction, the paragraph number 1. The paragraph number 2 is what they call the body of the report, and the conclusion would be this, you see? So the structure is right here, guys. You basically have to write a text like this, but using other graphs. So what I'd like you guys to do is to put everything together. So first of all, your sentences would be just perfect because we will not have this never-ending sentences that we sometimes have, but you know that you need to be careful with them, that you need to make sure to use complex compound sentences and so on. But the most important thing is to organize your sentences well, being careful with the structure of each one of them. But also, you can use this kind of vocabulary, guys. It's really important to use this vocabulary, this language for writing. So you need to use everything we've covered so far with this lesson to write that report, okay? Okay, guys, that is basically it. And that's it, guys. That's what I'd like you guys to do for tomorrow. So if that's okay, guys, if you have any other question, if there's anything you would like me to tell you, you can just let me know. Also, on the other hand, let me see. I want to share something with you. Oh, wait a minute. Give me a second. Yeah, I will share with you this article, which is where I took the examples from. This is a very good article on sentences in general terms. So I would recommend you guys read that. It's something very short, but it's very good as well. It has got basically all the key information that we give me a second. Okay, guys, apart from that, guys, once again, remember that the recording of a session, I will have the link by the end of the lesson when I upload it. So my suggestion, guys, for those of you who are asking in this moment, my suggestion would be to enter the YouTube channel that I've shared with you before. So when the link is there, you will see the recording. You see, so because I cannot share the link to this video, to this lesson right now. So here is the link once again for those of you who are answering for that, are asking for that. But you gotta wait a little bit because it will be uploaded like in, I don't know, 15 minutes when we finish here. Okay, just for you to keep in mind. Okay, guys, so if that's okay with you, I will stop the recording in this moment. We're gonna call the attendance and then we are good to go. So let me stop the recording.